Now that the Acolyte has wrapped up its run and is now simmering in the boiling pot of public consciousness that is social media, with a wide range of opinions on its material expressed in the calmest and most polite manner possible, yeah, reviewing this show feels like inviting a fire demon to live in my woodland home. So I'm just gonna rip off the bandage and say it straight out. I like this show, quite a lot, and I want a season 2. Hopefully there isn't going to be a mob showing up to lynch me for having an opinion of my own that doesn't line up with theirs, but I'll try and focus mainly on the show itself, so here goes. Over the course of the season, a series of mysteries are set up and unfolded, intended to feed into the show's week-to-week plot hook formula. This is an old technique used so heavily by shows in the past, like Prison Break, that it almost became a parody unto itself. The Acolyte utilizes this to its full advantage, as every week's episode ends off on a note of questions unanswered and an air of uncertainty lingering over the show's plotlines. Each episode would add to the overarching mystery, either by revealing new information or through posing questions, adding new plot threads for the characters to follow. As I was watching each week's episode, I felt myself wanting to get a little more out of the show than what it gave. But the intrigue and the interesting characters kept my attention throughout. Then episode 5 hit, and oh boy did it swing hard for the fences. This is the obligatory spoiler warning. If you haven't watched the show yet, do beware that some spoilers will follow. For the too long didn't watch summary, I would recommend giving the show a full watch, especially if you are interested in a mystery or amazingly choreographed action, as those are the show's strongest aspects. Do remember to always attempt to form your own opinions, untainted by the perspective of others, as then you will truly know whether or not you like something. With that said, the show has easily some of the best and most enthralling action scenes that Star Wars has to offer, showing different styles of fightings, or lightsaber forms, clashing together in a chaotic and unpredictable fashion, with the Jedi using a stable and formal form of fighting versus the more visceral and agile of the Stranger. The choreography work, as shown both in the show itself but also in the behind-the-scenes footage released, emphasizes a commitment of character expression through swordplay. The Stranger using any means necessary to win his fights and willingly taking lives without a moment's hesitation. He constantly moves his body with his lightsabers, creating an illusion of being everywhere in front of his opponents while constantly relentlessly barraging them with strikes aimed to maim or kill. This showcases him as a survivor willing to use everything in his power to come out on top in a fight, as opposed to the Jedi almost stumbling on top of one another with their rules of engagement and strict methodology, being forced to bail each other out of certain death in spite of their numbers advantage, even Master Soul being reluctant to kill the Stranger after he had already taken several Jedi lives. This directly leads into the Stranger escaping and the eventual finality that awaits Soul, along with setting Osha up for her dark side arc, where she explores the possibility of the Jedi simply being the wrong fit for her. Jackie and Soul were the definite standouts of the action from the Jedi side of things. Jackie showcased incredible adaptability to her circumstances and gave the Stranger a good run for his money in their 1v1. By consistently backing up and throwing endless defensive attacks at him, Jackie forced the Stranger to fight at a disadvantage, by having to find an opening in Jackie's defense rather than baiting her into making a mistake like he did with the other Jedi. The Stranger ends up having to actually go for a disarm rather than a kill strike. He only does this once. With Master Soul, the Stranger was outright outmatched. Soul's mastery over hand-to-hand combat and a focus on disarming or subduing his opponent allowed him to handle the Stranger and even overpower him in both their engagements. While the action was certainly satisfactory, I would also have loved to see May and Osha in particular get some more fight scenes. With the two of them being the main characters the plot revolves around, it was a little odd seeing so little of them in the show's strongest aspect. For reference sake, May is in 2 action scenes right at the start of the show, episodes 1 and 2 respectively, along with having a 1v1 fight scene with Osha in the finale, who mind you only got that singular proper fight scene. Amanda clearly has the physical chops to pull off the choreography and could have had a stronger presence with a few more fights. It left me feeling that these characters were missing or lacking in presence from the action that very much so revolved around them. On another note, I quite liked how neither of the sisters wielded a lightsaber before Osha in the finale, becoming an on-the-nose signifier that she has completed her journey into the dark side, making it clear as it can be what she had just become. For that scene, above any other, Amandla nails the perfect silent face acting to sell the emotional conflicts and self-realization her character had just undergone. Although her performance overall was to me lackluster, mainly due to how uneven it was at times. During the smaller, quieter scenes where she talks softly and plainly, it felt as if though the take that was used was the first one where she got through the line right. And other times, especially with the silent face acting scenes, she knocks it out of the park. The uneven performance doesn't tank the whole show, but it created an uneasy feeling of awkwardness with some of her scenes. Lee Jung-jae, on the other hand, was solid throughout the entirety of the show, bringing layers upon layers of emotions to every moment of every scene with years of passion and experience behind his craft. There were only a few moments where the language barrier could be felt, but for the most part I couldn't tell that he was parroting his lines. Spending 4 months working on how to pronounce English words correctly really paid off for his performance to shine through. Of course, I have to talk about Manny Jacinto and his layered performance. He does fantastic character work in his early scenes as Quimir, the silly goofball, before transforming himself into the murderous and intimidating stranger going on a killing spree, followed by him doing a romantic lead in a teacher role for his last 2 episodes. Him selling that switch was pivotal for the character and the intended role he had to play. Not to mention his unbelievably fantastic physical performance in both his action scenes, but more importantly, in his thirst scenes. The girlies on Twitter know exactly what I'm talking about. The rest of the cast also did a solid job overall and definitely are worthy of praise. But I'm not going to go into detail for the rest of the cast, just know that I thought everyone was performing splendidly. I touched a bit on the pacing before, and I'd like to add a talking point I saw some people on Twitter in particular were saying, that the show needed more time per episode and more episodes. Personally, I would agree that there were too few episodes. Certain aspects of the show could have benefited from more time to develop their ideas. But, that said, I also think the time per episode were actually ideal. Each episode had just the right amount of content for a singular episode. None of the episodes felt too slow or too fast. Even the slowest of the episodes, being episode 4, didn't lose my ADHD having attention span. I felt myself just tuning out before the stranger arrived on the scene, which hooked me right back in. With that fantastic puppet-like stage presence and ominous aura, I felt every breath coming out of my lungs. My point here being, if they add anything to the runtime, it should be in the episode count, not the length of each episode, as that seemed to be just the right fit. It's at this point I suppose it would be apt to address the weird drama the show had to deal with online. Before the show even began its run, there were several somewhat high-profile individuals performing a concerted effort to paint the show as the next in a long line of vile filth being presented to the public. All being vapid projections coming from those who does not possess valid information to make these assertions. It thankfully triggered an outpouring of love and support towards the showrunners, but this wasn't unanimous as there are plenty of easily manipulated individuals lurking around the internet. What then followed was a chaotic several weeks of attacks against the show by review bombing ratings on websites like Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb, as well as targeted harassment of the cast members, particularly Amandla Stenberg, but everyone was in some regard affected by this. On top of sniping at anyone on social media making positive posts about the show in any capacity, which thankfully there were plenty of, using vapid statements without any analytical prowess whatsoever, such as saying, "Bad writing, bad acting, lore breaking, it's just a bad show," etc., etc. This effort holds no value, expresses nothing but an empty-headed drone level of intelligence, and accomplishes nothing but let everyone know that you are weird. Never let anyone tell you what to think or feel about anything, least of all art. And don't even start on debating whether or not this show is art. It's a categorical label, not a qualitative one. An awkward argument that also came up were things to the tune of, "It's a plot hole that the twins have the same hairstyle when adults and kids." Which is a contrivance at worst, since it's to facilitate the mistaken identity plotline, and it's not unnatural for people to keep the same hairstyle for most of their lives. Then there was, "The legacy of Anakin is ruined by this show because now lesbian space witches did it first." The witches were not explicitly lesbians. They used the Force at a point of concentrated Force energy called a virgins to create life, unlike Anakin being created by the Force itself. The purpose of the twins wasn't to bring balance to the Force, it was to simply expand the Coven's numbers. Calling this the same thing is straight up an apples to oranges comparison, without contextual merit to qualify it. The closest thing to breaking the lore this show does is establishing an official age for Ki-Adi-Mundi, who previously only had one in Legends. There was also an offshoot critique of the show about the weight of the lightsaber props that was used and how it was slowing down the action. But as shown in this side-by-side comparison, the speed of the action is practically the same now as it were in the prequels. Mind you, Ewan McGregor stated in an interview that they had to sort of slow the footage down for the Phantom Menace because the actors were too fast. Ultimately, this means that the increased weight on the props puts the actor's speed at the natural rate of what is intended, reducing some of the post-production work. But let's get back on track and finish this up. I think overall the show is an easy to recommend watch for anyone looking to get into Star Wars who is above the age of 15. The show had plenty of fun excitement to offer, but not in a childish manner, other than the minor character of Basil. There really isn't anything goofy that happens. And the themes that the show explores focuses on might be a little boring to children. However, to anyone else, the show holds plenty of artistic value with fun action set pieces, distinctive and interesting character work, along with an exploration of religions in the Star Wars mythos. It's easy for me to say, give this show a fair chance and watch it.